Hey everyone, Jay Reale here from eBodyboarding.com, and board size is what I want to talk about here today. So board size, if we go back in the history of bodyboarding, was never an issue at the beginning because we all rode the same size boards. There weren't choices in terms of how big or small of a board, how wide, how thick. But the good news is now those options exist. So there's so many different board sizes, and it's crazy to try to figure out for a lot of people which size to get. Well, that's where the experts come in. But there are some good rules of thumb to follow. So the most important thing I think in bodyboarding is to have the correct board for your height, weight, location, and of course your budget. That all plays a part. So where do you start when determining your board size? Let's start with the most basic parameters. That is your height and weight and location. So how do those three things impact your choice? Well, height. So a bodyboard, the rule of thumb has always been, should generally come up to about your belly button height. But that's not completely set in stone. And the reason being, because some people have a long torso and short legs, or long legs and a short torso. So maybe a more accurate way to do that is hold the board up to your chin, and it should come down to roughly about your knee height. So use that as a very basic rule of thumb to choose your board length. I, for example, am 5'8" tall, and I ride a 41.5" board. That does happen to come up to my belly button, but that is the right size for me. And I've ridden different size boards before, but that provides me with the most maneuverability for both prone and drop knee. The other parameter is weight. How much do you weigh? So here's an interesting conundrum that we come across at eBodyboarding.com. A lot of riders who have been around the sport for a long time started riding back when they were 16, 15, 17, whatever, their early days, and they were thin and athletic, and they rode a board, and they come back in when they're in their 30s or 40s. Maybe they've put on some weight, but they think they can still ride that same board they rode all the way back in their early days. The problem is the board is not going to float them if they put on some pounds. So the good news is manufacturers like my brand, Try Bodyboards, we've come up with a high volume line of boards, and most brands nowadays have at least a couple of high volume options in their lineup of boards. What does that mean, high volume? It means a thicker board, a board that has more foam on it. It can also mean a wider board as well. So if you're a heavier rider, let's say you're short and wide, you need a board that's short and wide to float you and give you that glide and that speed and that ease of catching waves that you had when you were younger, thinner, and riding a smaller, thinner board. So the big thing is to swallow that ego, guys and girls. Don't think you can still ride that same board you rode 20 years ago if you've put on some weight. Swallow the pride, get the right board for your height and weight, and the thickness is going to give you the float, the width is going to give you the planing speed. So all of those things come into play. Now the last part of that equation, we talked about those three parameters, the third being your location. Where do you live? Are you in a cold water environment or a warm water environment? Generally speaking, a bodyboard needs to have some flex to perform properly. Imagine it, if any of you have ever ridden skis or snowboards, they're flexible for a reason, because when you lean into a turn, you want the board to flex and form that arc shape so that it will carve through a turn and then spring back to flat when you finish that turn to give you a little squirt forward. We call that projection. And you want the board to have a little bit of flex. So if you're in a cold water environment, generally speaking, a polyethylene core is going to give you that little bit of flex. And polyethylene is very sensitive to water temperature, so cool water, you want that polyethylene, which is a softer material, because it can handle the cold water without losing all of its flex. Polypropylene comes in different densities. There's a low density version and a high density version and in between versions. Obviously, if you're in a cold water environment, you're going to go for that lower density because, again, you want that flex. If you're in a warm tropical climate, you're going to go for the higher density polypropylene. And you got to consider the stiffeners that come in boards. There's various stiffeners, everything from stringers to mesh to Skin Tech, which is a proprietary material that comes from the factory that makes our Tribe bodyboards and some other brands. And all of those provide different levels of stiffness to the board. So the key thing is to go to a knowledgeable retailer. Of course, that's like us, eBodyboarding.com. Ask their advice, do some research. There's a ton of research on on our website and on our YouTube channel as well. And you can make an informed decision about which size, which core, how thick of a bodyboard to buy. So hopefully that helps you guys out.